Agatha Raisin and Mary Fortune's last garden day. A village competition turns deadly when pride, roses, and old grudges bloom into murder, and Agatha Raisin finds herself drawn, irresistibly, into the thorns of another scandal. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. Agatha Raisin swept into the WI hall with the strut of a woman who had spent a good 10 minutes practicing her entrance in the mirror. Her new blazer, a tailored navy number that whispered London money, caught the afternoon light as she marched across the scuffed wooden floorboards. She had paired it with kitten heels entirely unsuitable for village life, but highly suitable for provoking envy. Agatha expected at least one gasp, or a whispered compliment. Instead, she received a brisk, slicing question from Mary Fortune. "What variety of rose will you be exhibiting, Agatha?" Mary asked, sweet as vinegar. Agatha paused mid-stride. She chose the first impressive name she could recall from a glossy gardening magazine. The Crimson Felicity. Mary's smile was silk stretched over steel. How interesting. The Crimson Felicity is notoriously difficult. Most gardeners grow it only with years of experience. And yours, well... Her eyes drifted to Agatha's manicured but glaringly soil-free hands. Doris Simpson gave a delighted snort, which inspired a few giggles from the usual WI faithful. Agatha stiffened. How she loathed that particular sound. It meant Doris would repeat the story across Carsley before the end of the day, adding flourishes as she went. "I prefer a challenge," Agatha said crisply, ignoring the rising flush in her cheeks. "Some of us don't fear ambition." Mary inclined her head in a manner that suggested she feared nothing except perhaps bad wallpaper. Of course, though ambition is not always the same as expertise. Before Agatha could retort, Mrs. Blocksby gently tapped the table. "Shall we begin?" she asked with a warm smile that attempted to diffuse tension, though it rarely succeeded when Agatha and Mary were circling each other. The meeting commenced with the usual fuss over bake sale totals and whether the vicarage lawn had suffered from last month's fate. But today's agenda soon took a dramatic leap toward the competitive. "Carsley," Mary announced, standing with a flourish, "will host its first official Open Gardens Day in a fortnight." A chorus of pleased murmurs followed. Even Agatha felt a small lift of excitement, which she hid with a practised flick of her fringe. "And," Mary continued, savouring the pause, "we have secured a special guest judge, Felix Trent." The room erupted. Felix Trent, the television gardening critic whose weekly newspaper column could revive a failing nursery or kill a business stone dead, was practically horticultural royalty. Agatha raised an eyebrow, pretending worldly indifference. "How on earth did you manage that?" Doris asked, eyes wide. "Oh, Felix and I have corresponded for years," Mary said. "He's always admired my work." A ripple of admiration moved through the hall. Agatha detected a note of pride bordering on smugness. She also noted how Mary delivered the statement as if she were announcing tea with the Queen. Agatha crossed her legs, ankle-pointed with precision. "Television gardeners are all ego and hairspray," she said. "Anyone could impress them with a few roses." "Roses require patience," Mary said mildly, "and skill." A pointed silence followed. Agatha felt every woman in the room measuring her garden in their minds and finding it lacking. Mrs. Blocksby, ever the peacekeeper, leaned toward Agatha. "Gardens do take time, you know," she whispered. "You can't just buy your way to blooms." "Watch me," Agatha muttered. Mary resumed outlining the event's schedule, assigning the WI members to committees. Agatha barely heard her. An unwelcome but persistent image kept forming, Mary receiving Felix Trent's glowing praise while villagers cooed over her perfection. The idea caused a prick of jealousy that Agatha tried to crush under her kitten heel, but it persisted stubbornly. She forced her attention back to the meeting just in time to hear Mary say, "The judge will tour each participating garden, privately at first. The winner will be announced at the close of day." Doris raised her hand. "Will entries be anonymous?" "Of course not," Mary said, horrified. "Presentation is part of the competition." Agatha felt the heat rise again. Presentation she could handle. Presentation she excelled at. If quality of bloom was questionable, she could always supplement. Perhaps a few strategically purchased plants. The garden centre at Evesham never asked questions as long as one paid promptly. As the meeting concluded, Mary approached her, the picture of polite superiority. "Do let me know if you'd like a few beginner's tips," she said. "Not everyone finds roses intuitive." Agatha nearly choked. "Beginner? I'll have you know I was practically raised in a garden." "Yes," Mary said sweetly. "But was it your garden?" Agatha's mouth opened, searching for a suitable explosion. Nothing emerged except a strangled sound resembling a tea kettle's death cry. Mary glided away, her triumph so apparent that Agatha wanted to hurl a flower pot at her. Mrs. Blocksby laid a gentle hand on Agatha's arm. "Try not to take her remarks to heart." "I never take anything to heart," Agatha snapped. Mrs. Blocksby smiled softly. "Of course." Agatha stormed out of the W.I. Hall with the fury of a thwarted general, mentally rewriting her entire identity as a gardener. She pushed outside into a warm, slightly stuffy afternoon. Sunlight filtered through the hall windows, illuminating rows of innocent-looking seed trays. Mary had probably arranged them. Mary arranged everything. As Agatha marched down the lane toward her cottage, she constructed a mental list of plants, tools, books, and possibly trained gardeners she would require. She needed roses. She needed topiary. She needed something grand. Something that would make Mary choke on her own compost heap. By the time she reached Lilac Lane, her resolve had crystallized. Hodge sat in the window, tail flicking hopefully. He regarded her with the calm superiority only a well-fed cat could manage. "Well, you'll see," Agatha told him as she unlocked the door. "We're going to have the best garden in Carsley, even if it kills me." Hodge blinked once, unimpressed. Then he padded to his food bowl, which was scandalously half-empty. His priorities, as usual, were unshakably feline. Agatha sighed, fed him, and hung her blazer carefully over a chair. The elegant fabric looked faintly ridiculous in her modest, slightly chaotic cottage. She glared at it, then at herself, then muttered, "Mary Fortune won't know what hit her." Hodge stretched, yawned, and curled into a patch of warm floorboards, offering no opinion whatsoever, which somehow made Agatha feel both comforted and entirely on her own. "Simon, stop slouching. You look like a depressed scarecrow." Agatha delivered the command the moment she spotted the lanky teenager trudging past her gate. He had been minding his own business, kicking a stone down Lilac Lane, until Agatha swooped like a hawk with purpose. "I'm not slouching," Simon muttered. "You are, and it's ruining your chances of future employment," Agatha said. "Lucky for you, I'm offering a position." Simon blinked. "A position?" "My gardening assistant," Agatha declared, as if announcing a promotion at a London firm. "I'll pay you, a respectable rate, and you'll gain valuable experience." "In gardening?" "Yes, in gardening," Agatha snapped. "What did you expect, stockbroking?" Simon hesitated, but the promise of money overcame his instinct for self-preservation. "Fine. What do I have to do?" "Carry things," Agatha said, and refrain from commenting unless spoken to. With her new assistant secured, Agatha practically propelled him toward her little hatchback. They set off for the garden centre near Evesham, Agatha gripping the wheel with the determination of a woman about to reshape her destiny with potted shrubs. The garden centre's entrance boasted a cheerful sign, though the greenhouse beyond radiated a heat more suited to tropical frogs than Cotswold gardeners. Agatha marched inside, head high, only to be immediately confronted by Latin labels. "Simon," she said confidently, "fetch me 3 Lupercalabrinus." Simon stared. "What's that?" Agatha waved a hand. "Obviously a plant." A nearby staff member, a woman with sunburned cheeks and the expression of someone who had seen too many amateurs, approached. "Did you mean Lupinus polyphyllus, love?" Agatha bristled. "That's what I said." The woman smiled politely, which somehow made it worse. "We've got some lovely ones just over there." As they walked on, Simon whispered, "You didn't say that." "I implied it," Agatha hissed, "and keep moving." Agatha attempted another Latin name and mangled it so thoroughly that Simon choked, trying not to laugh. A second staff member stepped in, correcting her pronunciation with the gentle malice of a seasoned gardener dealing with the uninitiated. Still, Agatha would not be discouraged. She examined roses with fierce scrutiny, selecting the most mature specimens available. "Instant impact," she murmured, imagining Mary Fortune's face when she saw them. In the cactus aisle, Agatha's mobile rang. Only Roy Silver would use her number during business hours without apology. "Darling," Roy exclaimed, "I heard a dizzy rumour that some TV garden man is invading your quaint little village." "Felix Trent," Agatha said, pretending to sound bored. "Felix Trent? The one who called a Chelsea designer the horticultural antichrist? That one?" "Yes, that one," Agatha snapped, though she secretly enjoyed the awe in Roy's tone. "Oh, this is marvellous," Roy declared. "We absolutely must spin this. TV judge visits charming Cotswold village, and imagine if you win, London needs a countryside star." Agatha stood straighter. "Well, since you insist, you may put out a feeler or two. Quietly, for now." Roy laughed. "Leave it to me, but do try not to murder anyone before the coverage hits." Agatha hung up, feeling a renewed rush of purpose. If London magazines caught wind of her triumph, Mary Fortune would become a footnote. While Simon loaded the trolley, Agatha overheard a garden centre assistant muttering to a colleague, "Felix Trent, that man who ruined my cousin's nursery with one nasty column, should have stuck to pruning shrubs instead of careers." Agatha paused mid-step, a small clue slipping into her mind's pocket. Felix Trent was not universally adored. In fact, he seemed widely resented, a useful detail. She filed it away. Simon, meanwhile, stood awkwardly by the till as Agatha paid for enough plants to fill a lorry. Decorative features too, a wrought-iron arch, an oversized terracotta urn, anything that might convey the illusion of a seasoned gardener with impeccable taste. Once back in Castley, Agatha marched Simon into her garden. "We plant everything today." Simon looked at the mass of greenery. "All of it? Now?" "Yes. Open Gardens Day is practically tomorrow." "It's in 2 weeks," Simon said. "Time moves faster when you're being judged," Agatha replied. They set to work. Agatha supervised with the authority of a woman who had read several pages of a gardening pamphlet. Simon dug, lifted, and attempted small talk until Agatha silenced him with a glare. By mid-afternoon, Hodge sauntered into the garden, stiffly offended that new territory had appeared overnight. He inspected a freshly planted row of bulbs, pawed delicately at the soil, then dug one up with triumphant relish. "Hodge," Agatha wailed, "those were expensive." Hodge blinked, unimpressed, and padded off to find another victim. As Agatha replanted the bulb, Doris Simpson arrived for her weekly cleaning appointment, carrying her usual air of moral superiority. My, Doris said, surveying the chaos. "Garden looks lively today." "It's called progress," Agatha said. Doris sniffed. "Mary Fortune has her gardeners in 3 times a week. Her borders look magnificent already." Agatha stabbed a trowel into the soil with unnecessary force. "Good for Mary. And she says gardening can't be rushed. It takes a patient hand." Agatha gave Doris a stare sharp enough to slice hedge clippings. "Thank you for your insight. Please go dust something." Doris left the garden with the satisfied smirk of someone who had delivered precisely the amount of irritation she intended. As they continued planting, a lad from the garden centre wandered by on a delivery round. He recognized Simon and pulled him aside. "Heard Felix Trent's coming," he murmured. "Be careful, yeah? Bloke's trouble. People don't forget what he writes." Simon returned with a spooked expression. Agatha, unable to resist eavesdropping, found the warning overly dramatic, but it still planted a possible red herring squarely on Simon's lanky shoulders. By early evening, the borders were planted, lopsided, chaotic, but undeniably full. Agatha stepped back, chest swelling with pride she hoped was not misplaced. Simon wiped his forehead. "Looks good." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "You paused before saying that." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did. But no matter. It will look magnificent by Open Gardens Day, even if I have to glue flowers to the fence." Simon gave a small laugh, unsure whether she was joking. Agatha dismissed him for the day and watched him hurry off, as if fearing conscription into further labour. She remained outside as daylight thinned, the garden settling into uneven rows and hopeful clusters. It was not quite the masterpiece she envisioned, but with determination, and perhaps more shopping, she could shape it into something that would wipe the smirk off Mary Fortune's face. Hodge reappeared, curling lazily around the terracotta urn as if claiming it for himself. Agatha sighed and lowered herself onto a garden bench, her back protesting. "Well, Hodge," she said, "war has officially begun." The cat stretched, yawned and closed his eyes, signalling he found her declaration deeply uninteresting. Agatha gazed over her mismatched borders with a mixture of pride and dread. Still, the fading light gave them a forgiving glow, and for a brief moment she imagined Felix Trent admiring her efforts. She snorted. "If he doesn't, I'll plant him in the rosebed." Hodge flicked an ear but did not open his eyes. The kettle inside began its familiar soft rumble, drifting through the open kitchen window. Agatha rose stiffly, brushing soil from her sleeves, and gave the garden one last determined nod before heading indoors, guided home by Hodge's quiet, unimpressed presence. "Of all the mornings to start behaving like a snake," Agatha muttered at the hosepipe, which lay coiled on the path with an air of malice. She gave it a sharp kick. The hose responded by twitching only slightly, as if conserving its real vengeance for later. Open Gardens Day had finally arrived, and Carsley bustled with the smug excitement of people who believed flowers revealed moral character. Agatha had dressed accordingly, a dramatic hat with a sweep of black feathers, and an outfit more suited to Ascot than garden soil. It was wildly impractical, deeply uncomfortable, and entirely necessary. She opened her gate for the first wave of visitors, determined to appear poised. "Lovely morning, Agatha," called Mrs. Bloxby, bringing a group of WI ladies toward the front border. Agatha smiled graciously, just as the hosepipe burst into life. A violent spray shot upward, arcing over Agatha's head and drenching the cluster of WI ladies in a glittering curtain of cold water. "Oh, oh my goodness," squealed one. Another let out a startled oath that did not belong in a church hall. Agatha lunged for the tap, slipping slightly as she twisted the knob. The spray ceased. Mortification did not. Doris Simpson wrung out her cardigan, giving Agatha a look of smug martyrdom. "Some of us came to admire flowers, not take a bath." "It was a minor mishap," Agatha snapped. "Hoses are treacherous creatures." Across the lane, Mary Fortune's immaculate garden glittered in the morning light. Her lawn was clipped to aristocratic precision, her roses performed with theatrical abundance. She had even arranged tasteful garden furniture, as if the place were a country house weekend retreat. Visitors drifted through it in reverent silence. Mary herself glided among them, all smiles, gracious nods, and quiet superiority. Agatha felt her stomach twist. There were few sights more irritating than Mary being admired. As Agatha straightened her hat, a murmur swept down the lane. A white van had arrived, accompanied by a second smaller vehicle carrying equipment. A tall man with an angular face stepped out, adjusting his tie with theatrical boredom. Felix Trent, television's most feared gardening critic, had arrived. Behind him trailed a weary-looking assistant and a cameraman who appeared to regret his career choices. Felix surveyed Carsley with a curl of the lip. "Charming," he said, in the tone one used for an earnest yet unattractive child. Agatha smoothed her hat and considered drifting closer, but Felix had already crossed to Mary's gate. "So," he drawled, "this is the much-vaunted Fortune Garden. Let's hope reality matches the correspondence." Mary simpered. "I believe you'll be pleasantly surprised." Felix looked around. Pleasantly remains to be seen. Then he noticed a grouping of topiary shrubs, shaped into something between cones and collapsed sculptures. "And what do we have here? A tragic attempt at geometry?" Agatha bristled, although the topiary wasn't hers. Felix's tone alone was enough to irritate her. The assistant whispered something about filming angles, and Felix waved him away. Then his expression softened slightly as he approached Mary's rose arch. "This, at least, is impressive." Mary flushed with gratification. "It's taken years of work." Felix leaned in, his voice low. "And how much help, Mary? How many hands? How many favors?" Mary stiffened. "You know exactly how much." Their exchange sharpened, voices dipping into something darker. Agatha, who had drifted closer under the pretext of admiring a potting table, stilled. "You owe me," Felix whispered. "Don't pretend you don't." "I paid you back long ago," Mary hissed, "and you promised to leave the past alone." Felix scoffed. "Promises wilt faster than roses. Don't test me." Agatha blinked. Blackmail? Previous competitions? It was delicious, scandalous, and deeply suspicious. She lingered, pretending sudden fascination with Mary's mulch, but a group of visitors pushed past, and the pair drifted apart. Rumours caught fire instantly. "Do you think they had an affair?" one woman whispered. "No, no," said another. "He probably rigged a competition for her." "Or maybe she threatened him," added a third, eyes shining. Agatha absorbed the gossip greedily. The day was growing far more interesting than she'd anticipated. Near Mary's refreshment table, Felix accepted a glass of elderflower cordial. He sipped, grimaced, and suddenly coughed violently. His face flushed crimson for an alarming moment before he waved everyone off. "Hay fever," he rasped. "Too many blasted roses." Mary fluttered at him uselessly until he straightened with a dramatic sigh. "Next time," he muttered, "serve something less floral." A few visitors exchanged raised eyebrows. Agatha made a mental note. Felix did not seem the sort to suffer simple allergies. Agatha returned to her own garden briefly. Though she disliked leaving Mary unsupervised in triumph, a couple from Morton complimented her roses, though their doubtful glances suggested Simon had planted them slightly off-centre. Still, Agatha smiled graciously. "Gardening is an art," she said, "not a science." "Some art is more abstract," the woman murmured. Agatha clenched her teeth. From Mary's side came bursts of admiration. "Oh, Mary, you clever thing," and "This must be paradise in July," followed by a particularly smug laugh from Doris Simpson, who had drifted loyally to Mary's side. Agatha repositioned a potted shrub with the decisiveness of someone pretending it had always belonged exactly there. Then Simon jogged toward her. "Felix is doing individual notes now," he said. "He's sketching things in a little book." Agatha felt a flicker of dread. "What sort of notes?" "Don't know," Simon said, "but he looked intense." She glanced across the lane just in time to see Felix close his notebook with a snap. He gave Mary a long, unreadable look, then turned and strode toward the back of her garden. The roses cast shifting shadows over him as he passed beneath the archway. Agatha folded her arms. Something had shifted, something unseen, but prickling. Mary, for the first time all morning, looked unsettled. She watched Felix disappear among the hedges, her confident posture wavering. Agatha permitted herself a small, private satisfaction. "If anyone deserves a nasty shock today," she murmured, "it's Felix Trent." But as she watched Mary's perfect garden gleam too flawlessly in the sunlight, another thought wormed into her mind. A triumph that pristine always hides rot somewhere beneath. Agatha adjusted her hat, smoothed her skirt, and felt Hodge brush past her ankle as he wandered outdoors for warmth. She bent to scratch his head. "Well, Hodge," she said softly, "I have a feeling Mary's perfect day won't stay perfect." Hodge blinked slowly, unconcerned, then padded toward the cottage, where the kettle soon began its faint, comforting rumble. Agatha followed, half smiling, half dreading whatever the garden would offer next. The scream rose so sharply that Agatha's hat nearly leapt off her head. It sliced through the pleasant village chatter and sent visitors stumbling toward Mary Fortune's garden like startled sheep. Agatha, never one to ignore drama, pushed her way forward with speed unbecoming of someone in heels. "What now?" she muttered, already savouring the possibility that Mary's perfect day had gone spectacularly wrong. She reached the ornamental pond and froze. Felix Trent lay face down in the shallow water, his jacket snagged on a jutting rock, roses trailing mournfully across his back like a theatrical curtain. The pond was scarcely deep enough to drown a duck, let alone a grown man, but Felix was frighteningly still. "Oh, heavens," whispered Mrs. Bloxby, hand to her mouth. Mary Fortune stood rigid, white as chalk. He was laughing a moment ago," she stammered. "We were by the roses. He said something about the colour, then he wandered off." Visitors murmured useless observations. Someone suggested heart attack. Another claimed a slip. A third loudly insisted Felix had always looked the unhealthy sort, which Agatha found entirely true but unhelpful. Bill Wong arrived at speed, notebook already in hand, Mercester Police behind him. His calm presence quieted the crowd. "Please step back," he said firmly. "Everyone give us room." Agatha tried to remain where she was, but Bill shot her the look of a weary older brother dealing with an unruly sibling. She retreated exactly 2 steps. Officers knelt beside Felix. One touched his wrist, frowned, and shook his head. Bill examined the pond edges, the rocks, and Felix's soaked clothing. "It might have been a collapse," someone whispered. Bill didn't answer. His eyes lingered on the overturned glass near the pond, a delicate tumbler smeared with faint residue. "That his?" he asked Mary. I think so. I gave him cordial earlier, Mary whispered. He coughed dreadfully, remember? It must have been the hay fever. Agatha perked up. He did go quite red, she contributed helpfully, practically an alarming shade. Bill found this less helpful than she imagined. He pointed at an officer. Bag that glass. Carefully. Around them, the festive noise of Open Gardens Day wilted. A cool wind slipped through the roses, rattling their petals. Paper cups skittered across the grass like nervous mice. The cheerful chatter had dissolved into strained murmurs. A murder? Surely not, though you never know. Mary was alone with him, wasn't she? Mary inhaled sharply. I did nothing wrong, she snapped. Felix was perfectly well when he left me. Doris Simpson stepped forward with the self-importance of a witness in a period drama. Mary's always been a bit drastic with pests, she declared. Uses that strong stuff. It kills slugs from 5 feet away. Agatha groaned inwardly. Doris had never missed an opportunity to ruin someone's life with well-timed facts. Bill's brow lifted. Strong stuff. Mary's eyes widened. Every gardener uses herbicide and pellets, Bill. They're locked in my shed. Anyone could. Locked, Bill repeated. We'll need to see it. Mary nodded shakily. Agatha followed at a discreet but enthusiastic distance. Mary's shed was a monument to organization. Rows of labelled tins, packets and sprays. Bill picked up a bottle of herbicide, frowning at its weight. Half empty, he noted. Was it full? Mary wrung her hands. I think so. I'm not entirely sure. Bill lifted slug pellets next. Also recently used. Mary's voice trembled. Bill, I swear I have done nothing wrong. Felix was talking to me one moment and gone the next. Agatha leaned closer. He did seem odd today. That coughing fit wasn't normal, and he was arguing with you. Mary's expression pinched. We were discussing past matters. He was being dramatic. Dramatic? Agatha echoed. He said something about you owing him. Mary looked away. You hear far too much, Bill interjected gently. Let's stay focused. His tone softened. Mary, no one is accusing you, but we need to understand what happened. They returned to the pond as the coroner's assistant examined the body. The initial report was murky but troubling. Minimal water inhalation, he murmured, suggests he was already incapacitated before entering the pond. Agatha felt a thrill. Poison? She whispered. Not confirmed, the assistant said, but possible. Bill crouched beside Felix, noticing something odd on the critic's fingertips. A faint bluish dust, like powder from a chalky leaf. He picked up a swab and carefully collected it. What's that? Agatha asked. Don't know yet, Bill said, but it shouldn't be there. Agatha felt victorious. A clue. She darted a suspicious look at Mary Fortune, who looked ready to faint. And where are your gardening gloves? Bill asked suddenly. Mary blinked. My... what? Your gloves, Bill repeated. Not in the shed. Not by the roses. Mary's breath hitched. I don't know. I wore them earlier. Someone must have moved them. Doris, hovering nearby, delivered another dagger. She misplaces things all the time, she said, or else she throws them away when the colours fade. Bill ignored her. We'll need to locate them. Visitors began drifting away from the scene, eager to report to neighbours that they had personally seen a body among the roses. A few lingered, pretending concern while clearly enjoying the spectacle. Mrs. Bloxby approached Agatha quietly. Poor Mary, she whispered. Whatever happened, she looks frightened. Agatha folded her arms. Frightened people can still be guilty. Mrs. Bloxby gave her a knowing look. So can proud people. So can jealous people. So can anyone, really. Agatha bristled. Meaning me? Mrs. Bloxby smiled faintly. Meaning humans, dear. Bill stepped over to Mary. We'll need a formal statement. It's routine, but we should do it now. Mary's face drained of colour. But, before everyone, can't this wait? Bill shook his head with gentle firmness. Best to get it over with. Bill guided Mary toward the police car for a routine statement at the station. Villagers still whispered, of course. Carsley would whisper through a fire. But there were no cuffs, no formal charge, not yet. She was the last to see him alive. She always did fuss over those chemicals. Felix couldn't stand cheats. Well, her garden was awfully perfect. Agatha felt a ripple of satisfaction mixed with disquiet. She had wanted Mary humbled, yes, but not like this. Not marched through Castley as if heading to a medieval trial. She drifted closer to Bill. "Do you really think Mary did it?" Bill rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I think we shouldn't jump to conclusions." He glanced at her pointedly. "Which means you should definitely not jump to conclusions." Agatha sniffed. "I never jump, I deduce." Bill gave a tired laugh. "Please, Agatha, let us handle the investigation." She lifted her chin. "I shall do no such thing." He sighed. "That's what I was afraid of." Mary climbed into the police car, looking small and brittle. Doors shut softly, almost politely, and the vehicle rolled away down the lane. The garden she left behind felt strangely hollow, as though the roses themselves were holding their breath. Agatha watched the car disappear, her mind already racing. Poison, blackmail, missing gloves, residue on fingers. Someone had wanted Felix silenced, and Mary, whether innocent or not, had been perfectly placed to take the blame. A scandal had bloomed in Castley, and Agatha Raisin was already knee-deep in it. Hodge brushed against her calf, sensing tension, and gave a soft, questioning meow. Agatha bent down and scooped him up, ignoring the soil on his fur. "Well, Hodge," she murmured, "it seems we've stumbled into another mess." Hodge purred, unimpressed, and Agatha carried him inside, the kettle beginning its familiar, comforting rumble, as though eager to steady her nerves before the village's gossip storm truly burst. "Don't all talk at once," Agatha announced, seating herself squarely at the WI kitchen table as if chairing an inquiry into national security. Of course, everyone continued talking at once, raising the volume instead of lowering it. The WI kitchen had become the unofficial command centre of Castley's gossip machine. 3 kettles boiled in rotation, the counters steamed with teapots, and the air vibrated with speculation so thick one could have sliced it like sponge cake. Doris Simpson held court beside the fridge. "I told you," she declared, waving a teaspoon like a baton. Mary was the last person seen with him. Last person. She practically shoved him into that pond. "She didn't shove him," Mrs. Bloxby murmured, pouring milk with saintly calm. "There's been no evidence of that," Doris sniffed. "Evidence arrives eventually, and when it does, it usually agrees with me." Agatha rolled her eyes. "You'd accuse the vicar if it made a good story." "Only if he deserved it," Doris retorted, "which he sometimes does." A round of laughter followed. Agatha basked in the heat of the chaos. She felt invigorated, flushed with the thrilling sense that she was again at the centre of something important. A murder investigation, even an unofficial one, gave her life renewed purpose, although she would never admit that aloud. A timid voice broke through the din. "I did hear something odd." All eyes turned to a mousy woman clutching a folder of seed catalogues. "Livia Potts," Agatha said. "Your nursery, isn't it? The organic one." Livia nodded nervously. "Used to be. Felix Trent, he destroyed it. One remark on his program, just one. Said my cabbages looked like wilted optimism. People stopped buying. They assumed I couldn't grow anything." She gave a sad little shrug. "I lost everything." The room absorbed this unhappily. Agatha leaned forward. "So you had motive?" Livia startled. "No, well, I was angry, yes, but I'm not a murderer." "Anger often leads to dramatic decisions," Doris declared cheerfully, as though recommending a new brand of soap. "Doris," Mrs. Bloxby chastised gently, "let the poor woman speak." Livia fiddled with her sleeve. "I did see him talking with that man, Gavin Pike, the one who owns the big garden centre near the bypass." Agatha's ears sharpened. "Gavin Pike? Dark hair, smug walk, talks as if he invented compost?" "That's him," Livia whispered. "They were arguing by the petunias. Something about contracts and truth. I didn't want to overhear, but they weren't exactly quiet." A murmur swept the room. Gavin was well known in the district for supplying plants to the council at suspiciously generous prices. "So now Gavin had motive too," Agatha said, pleased. "How lovely. Our suspect list is becoming positively plump." Mrs. Bloxby sighed. "It's not lovely, Agatha." "Oh, it is," Agatha insisted. "A village murder without a full roster of suspects is simply tacky." The door banged open, and in strode Bill Wong, looking like a man braced for trouble. "Right," he said. "I need statements from everyone who saw Felix today." "Tea first?" offered Mrs. Bloxby. Bill hesitated. Good manners battled police protocol, before accepting. Agatha smirked. She knew Castley hospitality always won. He set his notebook down. "Please don't speculate, just tell me what you actually saw." A laugh rippled through the room. Telling Bill not to speculate was like telling hens to stop clucking. Doris was first. She repeated her version of events with embellishments so extravagant Agatha suspected she was angling for a memoir deal. Mary asked for cordial. Mary served more cordial. Mary practically bathed Felix in cordial. Agatha cut in. He coughed violently after drinking it. Turned quite alarming. Bill scribbled tersely. "We're aware he reacted." Next came Livia, whose trembling account of the Gavin argument caused Bill to raise an eyebrow. "Interesting," he murmured, writing quickly. Gavin Pike himself strolled in moments later, summoned by the collective rumour network of Gloucestershire. He behaved like a man confident he could charm his way out of anything. "Terrible business," he sighed. "Felix and I were old friends." "Friends don't argue about contracts," Agatha said. Gavin's eyes tightened barely an inch. "We had professional disagreements," Bill pressed. "And what were those disagreements?" Gavin examined his cufflinks. "Miscommunications, nothing more." Agatha was delighted. A guilty man always polished his cufflinks. The kitchen swelled again with conversation. Steam hissed from kettles, teaspoons clattered, gossip simmered merrily. Every time someone paused, 3 more opinions sprang up. Felix had enemies everywhere. Some said he once humiliated a Chelsea gardener on live television, others that he'd sabotaged a competitor's greenhouse by accidentally switching irrigation settings. In the midst of this noise, a WI helper, young, shy, wearing a flour-dusted apron, approached Agatha. "Mrs. Raisin, I don't know if this is important." Agatha leaned in like a hawk over prey. "Everything is important in a murder." The girl swallowed. "Well, Mrs. Fortune asked me to fetch extra sugar cubes for Mr. Trent's tea. She wanted everything to look nice, you see, but when I came back, the tray had been rearranged." "Rearranged?" Agatha pressed. "Yes, the bowl felt heavier, and someone had moved the napkins I'd folded." Agatha's heartbeat quickened, a clue humming with potential. "Did you see who touched the tray?" The girl shook her head. "No, people were everywhere." Bill overheard and approached. "Let's stay factual. Mary asked for sugar, but we don't know who altered the tray." Agatha's eyes gleamed. Exactly. It could have been anyone. Someone hoping Mary would take the blame. Doris folded her arms. Or Mary did it herself. Agatha waved this away. Even if she did, she's far too organized to leave a messy trail. That tray was practically begging for a framing. Bill sighed. "Agatha—" "What?" she said innocently. "I'm simply noting possibilities. It's called thinking. It's called interfering." She gave him a sweet smile. "Thank you." Bill groaned softly, returning to his notebook. Conversation swelled again, louder than ever. Women perched on counters, leaned over sinks, and stood shoulder to shoulder like hens in a particularly dramatic barnyard. Someone passed around a tin of biscuits, which quickly disappeared. Someone else suggested a prayer circle, which failed to launch. At last the crowd began to thin. Interviews drained energy even from enthusiastic gossips. One by one they trooped out, leaving Agatha, Doris, and Mrs. Bloxby behind with the warm hum of the refrigerators. Agatha stood, feeling the lingering buzz of the day. "Well," she declared, "Mary may be the village favourite to arrest, but she's not the only one with secrets." Mrs. Bloxby smiled sadly. "Everyone has secrets, Agatha." "Yes, but Mary's are better curated," Agatha replied. "Do try to tread carefully." "I always tread carefully," Agatha said. Mrs. Bloxby gave her a look. "No, dear, you do not." Agatha sniffed. "I tread exactly as the investigation requires." Doris gathered her cleaning cloths with the smug air of someone who believed she had single-handedly solved the crime. "Just you wait," she said. "Everything will come out. It always does." Agatha ignored her. She stepped into the evening with purpose. Outside, the sky had cleared into a crisp, chilly blue-black, the air smelling faintly of wood smoke and cut grass. Porch lights flickered on across the village. Castley felt small, contained, almost cosy, a deceptively neat setting for a murder. Agatha walked home slowly, replaying the girl's words about the sugar tray. Someone had tampered with it, someone clever enough to shift suspicion, someone who had reason to silence Felix Trent. She muttered to herself, "Mary Fortune's last garden day. What a headline. A greedy shiver ran through her. But Mary won't be the only woman written about after this. Hodge was waiting at her gate, tail flicking. He trotted beside her to the door, where the soft sigh of the kettle welcomed them home. Agatha scratched behind his ear. "Don't worry, Hodge. Your mistress is on the case." Hodge stretched, unimpressed, and padded inside in search of warmth, leaving Agatha alone with her thoughts and the first sharp taste of a mystery she fully intended to unravel. "You look as if you've won a prize," Charles remarked, leaning against his open-top car with the lazy charm of a man who did nothing unless it amused him. "Word is, there's a famous TV gardener floating in Mary's pond. Castley never disappoints." Agatha planted her hands on her hips. "He didn't float, and he's not famous anymore. He's dead." Charles grinned. "Even better for gossip." Agatha gave him a glare sharp enough to prune roses. "You're coming with me." "Where?" "London." Charles lifted an eyebrow. "Is this a date?" "It's investigative work," Agatha snapped, "and I need a driver who won't complain." "I complain constantly." "Ignore that part and get in the car." 5 minutes later they were roaring toward the motorway, Agatha gripping the dashboard as Charles took corners with aristocratic nonchalance. Wind battered her hat until she finally yanked it off and stuffed it under her arm. "You could drive more carefully," she shouted. "I could," Charles replied, accelerating, "but then you'd have less to complain about." Agatha folded her arms. She disliked how smug London always looked in the distance, rising from the haze like a reminder of her past anxieties and nearly accomplished dreams. Today, however, she intended to confront it on her own terms. They arrived at Felix Trent's production offices, a squat building with pretensions of glamour, mirrored windows, wilting potted palms, and a reception desk guarded by a secretary whose expression suggested she had dealt with many mad visitors and expected today to be no different. "Name?" she asked. "Agatha Raisin," Agatha said firmly. "I'm investigating Felix Trent's death." The secretary blinked. "Are you with the police?" "No," Agatha said. "Better." Charles coughed, doing his best to look legitimate. "We were hoping to speak with his producer." The woman drummed her nails. "You'll want Martin Lyle. He's upstairs." They were shown into a small office smelling faintly of burnt coffee and despair. Martin Lyle, a thin man with tired eyes and a crisp shirt that didn't match his posture, waved them to chairs. "Terrible business," he muttered. "Felix dead. Though if I'm honest, I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner. He annoyed everyone eventually." Agatha leaned in. "What sort of man was he?" Martin rubbed his face. "Brilliant at times. Cruel at others. Enjoyed the power more than the gardening. He collected secrets the way other people collect stamps." "Secrets?" Agatha echoed. Martin nodded toward a filing cabinet. "He kept files on everyone he criticized, letters, photos, background checks. He said it helped him shape narratives. I called it digging dirt." "Oh, lovely," Agatha murmured. "May we see them?" Martin hesitated. Then, with a shrug of exhaustion, he opened the drawer. "It's all chaos now. No one will stop you." Agatha's fingers flicked through folders gleefully. Show hosts, gardeners, nursery owners. Each file a testament to Felix's talent for ruining people. Then one folder caught her eye. Cotswold Cheats. She pulled it out. Inside, photos of Mary Fortune's garden from months earlier, looking suspiciously less immaculate, notes about purchased plants disguised as homegrown, receipts from specialist growers, and another section titled Organic Fraud, with scribbled references to a woman whose so-called organic nursery uses commercial fertilizer. "That's Livia Potts," Agatha said. "He destroyed her business once." Martin nodded. "He intended to expose her fully. New series pitch." Agatha flipped another page. There were snippets of council reports, invoices signed by Gavin Pike, and phrases like kickback rumour, landscaping contracts, and conflict of interest. Agatha's pulse quickened. He was planning a major exposé. "Exactly," Martin said. "Felix didn't just critique gardens. He toppled reputations." "Did he have enemies here?" Charles asked. Martin gave a humourless laugh. "I'm his producer. I'm practically his enemy." A soft tap sounded, and the secretary poked her head inside. "You have another visitor asking about Felix." Roy Silver burst into the room like a sequined meteor. "Darlings, I heard everything. Murder, intrigue, rural drama. It's fabulous." Agatha groaned. Roy, why are you here? To pitch a feature to my magazine, Roy said. Something like Death Among the Dahlias or Corpse in the Compost. We'll work on the title. This is not an opportunity, Agatha snapped. Roy pouted. Everything is an opportunity, especially when someone dies in a picturesque location. Charles murmured. He may have a point. Agatha shot him a glare. Do not encourage him. Roy fluttered closer to Martin. Tell me, darling, who hated Felix the most? Martin gestured at the cabinet. Pick a file. Roy clapped his hands. Marvellous. As Roy proceeded to make himself comfortable and unhelpful, a cameraman wandered in, a burly man with a perpetually annoyed expression. I heard someone asking about Trent, he grumbled. If anyone had reason to sabotage him, it was me. Man never credited anyone. Didn't listen to advice. Nearly got me fired last year. Agatha brightened. Sabotage? He accused me of ruining a shoot, the cameraman said, when it was his fault for stepping backwards into a water feature. I hoped he'd get what was coming to him. Where were you the day he died? Agatha asked. Editing suite, the man replied without hesitation. Had the receptionist sign me in. Agatha deflated. A satisfying suspect, but the timing didn't fit. Still, she enjoyed the dramatic possibilities. After another hour of chaotic questioning, mostly Roy interrupting with suggestions for headlines, Agatha thanked Martin and made careful notes from the Cotswold Cheats folder before marching toward the exit with renewed purpose. Outside, Charles raised an eyebrow. Productive? Extremely, Agatha said. Felix had dirt on everyone. No wonder someone killed him. Roy trailed behind them, sighing deeply. I do wish you'd let me write this up. You'd look marvellous on a page spread with roses behind you. I'd rather be buried under the roses, Agatha snapped. Roy brightened. That could be a title too. Agatha shoved him into a taxi before he could elaborate. Go home, Roy. Fine, he said, adjusting his scarf. But call me if you uncover anything glamorous. Charles chuckled. He does bring enthusiasm. He brings hysteria, Agatha corrected, and glitter. She glanced at Charles. Back to Carsley. I need my thoughts and several cups of tea. On the drive back to Carsley, Agatha opened the folder again. The pages smelled faintly of dust and scandal. She studied Mary's entry. Felix had been planning to reveal her garden as less than honest, noting, comically perfect layout must be staged. Investigate sources. He had also scribbled, possible past favour, leverage. Blackmail, Agatha muttered. He was blackmailing Mary. Charles leaned over. What about the organic fraud? That's Livia, Agatha said. He would have ruined her all over again. She turned to the Gavin section, filled with invoices and cryptic comments. One note read, Council contract suspicious. Dig deeper. Another, Pike nervous. Hiding something. Agatha tapped the page. Gavin Pike had the most to lose financially. Charles nodded. So far we have 3 solid suspects. 3 suspects, Agatha mused, and 1 corpse with blue dust on his fingers. Blue dust? Agatha waved a hand dismissively. Something Bill noticed, though I'm sure he'd rather I didn't recall it. She stared out the window, watching grey fields blur into green. Something about Felix's notes unsettled her. The murder felt less about gardens and more about bruised pride, revenge and money. Always money. Charles nudged her. You're frowning. I'm thinking, Agatha replied. Dangerous. Agatha ignored him, studying the pages again. Each suspect was a tangle of secrets. Each had reason to silence Felix Trent permanently. When Charles slowed the car near Morton in Marsh, Agatha closed the folder firmly. Her reflection in the window looked determined, slightly windblown, and more alive than she had felt all week. This murder, she murmured, is rooted in far more than roses. Hodge greeted her later with a disdainful meow at the door, as if London grime had offended his sensibilities. Agatha scooped him up, inhaling the warm, familiar scent of her cottage. Don't worry, Hodge, she whispered. Your mistress is bringing home dirt of her own. Hodge yawned, unimpressed, and padded toward the kitchen, where the kettle began its soft, promising rumble, an anchor pulling her gently back into Carsley life. Mary Fortune's curtains were shut so tightly they looked stapled. Agatha stared at them with deep suspicion. She's hiding something, Agatha muttered, barging into the WI subcommittee room where half the village had already gathered. Or pretending to, which is practically the same thing. Doris Simpson sniffed. She should hide. If I'd been caught cheating with shop-bought roses and passing them off as homegrown, I'd emigrate. You can't even grow parsley, Agatha shot back. That's not the point. Mary Fortune sat stiffly at the end of the table, hands clasped. She looked as if she had been carved out of cold marble. The chairwoman, Mrs. Templar, cleared her throat. Mary, the committee would like to clarify a matter regarding your entries in last year's village show. It was legitimate, Mary said tightly. Entirely legitimate. Agatha settled into a seat with the delighted air of someone prepared for entertainment. Felix Trent had notes, she said. Extensive ones. Mary's jaw trembled. Felix was blackmailing me. He said he had proof that I bought mature specimens instead of growing them myself. I denied it, of course. Of course, Doris muttered loudly. Mary's cheeks flushed. But then he said he would publish a column exposing me, unless I did a favour. A very specific favour. The room leaned forward collectively. Agatha prodded. Which was? Mary breathed out shakily. He wanted me to rig the judging at a regional show. He'd promised a prize to someone he owed politically. I refused. I said I'd rather be exposed than live under his thumb. Agatha felt a flicker of reluctant admiration. Mary could be insufferable, but courage was courage. Mrs. Templar frowned. And you never told anyone? No, Mary whispered, because he did have proof. Real proof. He said he'd ruin me. I thought if I stayed quiet, perhaps he'd lose interest. Her eyes grew glossy. I didn't kill him, Mrs. Templar. I may be proud, but I'm not violent. Agatha watched Mary's trembling hands with growing discomfort. This was not the posture of a calculating murderer. This was fear. The meeting ended awkwardly, with Mary brushing past Agatha without a glare, which was unsettling in itself. Outside, Mrs. Bloxby waited, her gentle face thoughtful. Agatha, she said softly. Mary looked genuinely terrified. She looked guilty, Agatha countered, though without conviction. Mrs. Bloxby shook her head. Not guilty. Cornered. Agatha exhaled sharply. Well, whoever killed Felix is happy letting Mary take the fall, and I don't intend to let that happen unless she's actually guilty. You do have a kind heart, Mrs. Bloxby said. I do not, Agatha snapped automatically, but Mrs. Bloxby only smiled. That night, Agatha was dragged from sleep by a sound she knew intimately. Hodge growling. Not an irritated grumble. A proper warning. She bolted upright. What now? Hodge stood rigid at the window, tail flicking like an irritated metronome. Something rustled outside. Faint, deliberate. Agatha threw on a dressing gown and marched to the back door with righteous fury. If Mary was sneaking about trying to ruin her boarders, Agatha would give her something to regret. She flung the door open. Moonlight washed the garden in pale silver, revealing chaos. Trampled soil, bent stems, a knocked-over pot. Agatha's breath hitched. My boarders, the nerve! She stepped onto the grass, wincing as her slippers squelched. She crouched by the flower beds, examining the disturbed earth. Footprints, several, blurred in the damp soil. Too messy to read properly, but not the neat, measured steps Agatha associated with Mary. Not Mary, Agatha muttered, or not Mary alone. A gust drifted from the direction of the shed, carrying a sharp chemical tang. Agatha wrinkled her nose. Herbicide, or something nastier. She hurried toward the shed. The lock hung crooked, deep scratches around the metal. Fresh, recently forced. Agatha's irritation flared hotter than fear. They broke into my shed? Are they mad? The door creaked open under her touch. Inside, everything looked normal at first glance, but one shelf had a faint smear across the dust, a space where something had been taken or examined. She scanned the bottles. One labelled slug pellets looked slightly misaligned. Another jar had its lid tightened more than she remembered. Someone's been searching for something, she whispered, or planting evidence. She snapped upright. Had the intruder meant to steal something of hers, or hide something that would incriminate Mary later? Hodge padded to the doorway, emitting a final growl of disapproval before rubbing his cheek against her leg as if to say, "Can we go back to warmth now?" Agatha scooped him up. "This is a declaration of war," she announced to the moonlit garden. "No one uses my flower beds as a shortcut to murder." The gate at the back of her property swayed lightly. Ajar. She approached and noticed scuffed earth on the path beyond, a clear escape route. "Whoever you are," she muttered, "you're making a very foolish enemy." She stood for a moment under the silvered sky, the mild breeze rustling what remained of her poor borders. That familiar thrill, fear braided with excitement, curled through her chest. Someone was framing Mary Fortune. Someone was prowling around her garden at night. Someone thought Agatha Raisin was too vain and too nosy to be dangerous. "Oh, they'll regret that," she promised, clutching Hodge tighter. And with that, she marched inside, already planning her next move. Agatha's sleep was ruined after that. She paced the cottage until dawn, muttering about footprints, chemical smells, and amateur criminals. Hodge, having endured quite enough nocturnal drama, curled on the sofa and refused to acknowledge her commentary. By morning, Agatha had worked herself into a fine blaze of indignation. She stormed across the green to tell Charles everything, but found him leaning lazily against his car, polishing his sunglasses as if preparing for a Riviera holiday rather than a murder inquiry. "You look deranged," he said cheerfully. "Someone broke into my garden," Agatha snapped. "In the dead of night." Charles blinked. "Why?" "If I knew that, I wouldn't be shouting." She explained the footprints, the shed scratches, the chemical smell. Charles listened, only interrupting to suppress a smile. "Agatha, perhaps it was a fox." "A fox does not break locks," Agatha said, "and it doesn't carry slug pellets." "Well, a very determined fox." "Charles," he lifted both hands. "Fine. You believe someone's framing Mary. That would imply the killer is still active." "Yes," Agatha said grimly, "and bold enough to skulk around my property." Charles glanced toward Mary Fortune's tidy cottage, curtains still drawn. "Have you considered Mary herself?" "The footprints were too big, and she's barely holding herself together. She's terrified." Charles nodded thoughtfully. "Fear doesn't rule her out." "No," Agatha admitted, "but it does nudge her down the suspect list." As she turned away, Charles caught her arm. "Be careful, Aggie." She bristled at the nickname. "Careful is dull." "Careful is alive," Agatha harumphed. "Alive is fine, but solving this murder is better." She stomped off before Charles could protest. The WI hall buzzed again that afternoon, though the mood had shifted. There was less gleeful speculation and more brittle worry. Doris Simpson accosted Agatha the moment she entered. "I heard your garden was attacked." "Not attacked," Agatha corrected. "Violated." "Same thing," Doris said. "You should report it to Bill." "I will," Agatha said, though she dreaded the lecture. Before Doris could follow her, Mrs. Blocksby approached. "I heard about your midnight disturbance." "News travels quickly," Agatha muttered. Mrs. Blocksby gave a sympathetic smile. "Agatha, please be cautious." "I am cautious." Mrs. Blocksby raised a brow. "Well," Agatha conceded, "I am sometimes cautious." "Investigations can provoke people," Mrs. Blocksby warned gently. "Someone desperate may act rashly." Agatha hesitated. "You really think Mary didn't do it?" "Yes. She's proud, but she's not cruel." "And the killer is someone who fears exposure," Mrs. Blocksby finished softly. The remark settled heavily in Agatha's mind. Bill Wong arrived later to take statements. Agatha cornered him immediately. "My garden was broken into. Footprints everywhere. Shed tampered with." Bill pinched the bridge of his nose. "Agatha, you can't leap to conclusions." "I can, and I will," Agatha declared. "Someone was planting or removing evidence, and the chemical smell—" "Describe it." "Herbicide. Strong. Not the cheap stuff." Bill wrote something down. "I'll look at it. But please, Agatha, don't go creeping around at night." "I wasn't creeping," Agatha protested. "I was defending." Bill gave her a look that suggested this was not comforting. "And keep Charles out of trouble," he added. "Charles? He's useless." "Exactly." Agatha left before Bill could lecture her further. That night her garden sat quiet under the mild moonlight. Agatha stood by the window, arms crossed, surveying her trampled borders with fierce resolve. Someone in Carsley was playing a dangerous game. Someone who knew Felix Trent's secrets, and feared their own being revealed. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't know the killer yet, but she knew this much. They had made the mistake of stepping on Agatha Raisin's begonias, and no one got away with that. Behind her, Hodge stretched luxuriously on the armchair, offering a single unimpressed blink before curling into sleep. the faint hiss of the kettle drifting from the kitchen, grounding her, steadying her, reminding her that even in mystery, home remained warm. Agatha touched the window pane lightly. "They'll regret underestimating me, Hodge," she whispered. The cat flicked an ear but did not move, and under the still, moonlit sky of Castley, Agatha Raisin vowed her borders, and her pride would not be trampled again. Agatha's patience lasted only as long as her first cup of tea the next morning. Mary Fortune's arrest seemed to loom over Castley like an unspoken storm cloud, even though the sky itself was a breezy, sunlit blue. Mrs. Bloxby's gentle doubts about Mary's guilt had lodged stubbornly in Agatha's conscience, irritating her almost as much as Doris Simpson's triumphant whisperings that Mary's goose is cooked. "No goose is cooked," Agatha muttered, marching up the gravel path toward Livia Potts's nursery, with Charles trailing behind her. "And if anyone's goose is cooked, I intend to know precisely who lit the oven." Charles sighed. "Do you ever listen to yourself?" "Constantly," Agatha said. "It's why I'm so effective." The nursery sat on the edge of the village, a small cluster of polytunnels and wooden crates that looked tired, as though hope itself had been composted months ago. The organic signs drooped limply from rusted nails. Half the stock wilted in the sunlight, and the surviving plants seemed to cling to life more out of stubbornness than nourishment. Livia Potts emerged from behind a row of drooping tomato plants, wiping her hands on her apron. She looked more defeated than suspicious, but Agatha reminded herself that guilt often wore a weary mask. "Oh," Livia said, startled. "Mrs. Raisin, and Mr. "Charles Fraith," he said with a polite nod. "I'm here to ask very silly questions about compost." Livia blinked uncertainly. Agatha stepped forward briskly. "We're following up on some concerns. Felix Trent's death." Livia winced visibly. "Must we talk about him?" "Yes," Agatha said, "unless you'd prefer he haunt you." Charles coughed. "Aggie, please." Livia rubbed her arms. "He ruined me. One episode, one snide remark about my cabbages. Customers vanished. Council contracts went to Gavin Pike. I had staff once, you know. 3 helpers. Couldn't keep them. Now it's just me." Her bitterness was palpable, but bitterness alone didn't equate to murder, though Agatha found it excellent fuel. "And did Gavin ever thank you," Agatha asked sweetly, "for handing him all your business?" Livia frowned. "Thank me? He undercuts me at every turn. Cheap stock, flashy displays. People love a bargain more than integrity." Charles wandered toward a stack of fertilizer bags, distracting Livia with questions about soil acidity. When she turned her back, Agatha slipped into the tiny office at the rear of the nursery. It smelled of damp paper and dust. A metal filing cabinet leaned drunkenly in the corner. On the desk sat invoices, faded envelopes, and a cracked plastic mug bearing the slogan, "Grow Kindness." Agatha rifled through the paperwork, scanning quickly for anything useful. A stack of receipts caught her eye. Most were small purchases: seed trays, gloves, twine. But then, halfway down, herbicide, Blue Shield brand, industrial strength. Agatha's pulse quickened. That was the same brand Bill mentioned from Mary Fortune's shed. And the date, 2 weeks before Felix's visit, was too early for murder plotting, unless Livia had psychic tendencies. A red herring, or real evidence disguised by timing. She slipped the receipt into her pocket. It wasn't theft, she assured herself. It was evidence acquisition. Completely different. Charles poked his head into the office. "She's coming back, and she's talking about nitrogen content as if it's a religion." Agatha shut the drawer. "Good. Keep her talking." They left minutes later, Livia waving half-heartedly. "If you see Gavin Pike," she called out, "tell him his precious council order is late because the courier broke half the begonias." Agatha froze. "Council order?" "Yes," Livia said with a bitter laugh. "He's the main supplier now. The council buys exclusively from him. Exclusive contracts. Very lucrative." Agatha exchanged a sharp glance with Charles. Felix had been investigating those contracts. "Thank you, Livia," Agatha said tightly. "You've been very helpful." They walked away, Agatha's mind spinning. Livia had motive from personal ruin. Gavin had motive from financial risk. And Mary, well, Mary had pride and blackmail. The suspects were aligning with unnerving symmetry. Later that afternoon, Agatha marched into the Red Lion. Charles behind her shaking imaginary dust from his coat. Bill Wong sat at the bar, nursing a tonic water and looking exhausted. He spotted Agatha and groaned very quietly. "Oh, good," he said. "Trouble." Agatha ignored the remark. "We visited Livia Potts." "I know," Bill said. "Half the village already told me." Agatha leaned in. "Felix had a file on her, called her an organic fraud, said he'd expose her again." Bill nodded. "I saw that, but I didn't call her in because Felix's notes also mentioned Gavin Pike." He pulled a folded sheet from his pocket. "Felix had details about council landscaping contracts, whispers of corruption, inflated invoices. If he exposed that, Gavin would lose everything." Agatha's pulse quickened. "So Gavin has the strongest motive." "He's certainly a contender," Bill admitted. Before Agatha could respond, Doris Simpson barged in. "Bill, I saw Gavin Pike earlier near Mary Fortune's back gate, just before the scream. He was loitering like a fox near chickens." Bill frowned. "Are you sure?" "Of course I'm sure," Doris said. "My eyesight is extraordinary." "Your eyesight is selective," Agatha muttered. But the claim lodged itself firmly in her mind. Gavin Pike had been near Mary's garden moments before Felix died. The mystery tightened like a noose. Agatha sat down opposite Bill, her expression sharpening. "Gavin was near Mary's gate. Why?" Bill tapped his pen. "He had no reason to be there, officially." "Unofficially," Agatha said, "he had every reason. If Felix Trent was about to expose his contracts, Gavin had far more at stake than Mary ever did." Charles nodded thoughtfully. "Money beats roses every time." Doris folded her arms. "I still say Mary did it." "You say everyone did it," Agatha snapped. "Well, one of them did," Bill cut in sharply. "Enough! The case is sensitive. London media is sniffing around. We need solid evidence, not gossip." Agatha opened her mouth to retort, but Bill raised a hand. "And before you tell me you're helping, please don't." "I'm helping," Agatha said anyway. Bill sighed so deeply even the bar stools seemed to lean away from him. Outside, the village green buzzed with rumours. Carsley thrived on scandal the way roses thrived on manure, and today the manure was plentiful. Curtains twitched. Conversations halted as Agatha passed. A few villagers whispered "murderess" under their breath, though whether they meant Mary or merely enjoyed saying it was unclear. Agatha ignored them and strode toward her cottage. The herbicide receipt burned figuratively in her pocket. Livia seemed unlikely. The timing felt off. But motives were rarely tidy things. Charles caught up. "So where does this leave us?" "Confused," Agatha said, "which is my least favourite state. Mary's motive is pride and fear. Livia's is revenge. Gavin's is money. And someone was in my garden last night planting or stealing evidence." Charles frowned. "You think they might try again?" "I hope so," Agatha said fiercely. "I'll be ready." As they reached her gate, a commotion drew their attention. 3 police cars crawled into Carsley, lights flashing quietly, as if embarrassed by their own urgency. Villagers poured from houses like pigeons to breadcrumbs. Bill Wong stepped out of the lead car, face grim, followed by 2 officers. Agatha felt her stomach drop. "Bill, what is this?" Bill didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked straight toward Mary Fortune's cottage. Mary emerged with her solicitor, pale but upright. She looked neither guilty nor triumphant, merely worn. Her hands trembled as she held onto her handbag like a life raft. Bill cleared his throat. "Mary Fortune, I am arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Felix Trent." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Doris nearly fainted from the joy of being correct. Agatha stepped forward. "Bill, you can't seriously think Mary did this." Bill looked pained. "Agatha, the evidence points strongly in her direction. Motive, opportunity, and items found in her shed." "That shed could have been tampered with," Agatha cried. "Which you should not know," Bill snapped. Mary's solicitor held up a hand. "We will cooperate fully." Mary's eyes flicked to Agatha. For the first time since Agatha had known her, Mary Fortune looked utterly defeated. And Agatha felt it, a sharp, unwelcome pang. Sympathy, real sympathy. "Bill," she said quietly, "you're making a mistake." Bill shook his head. "We must act." The officers guided Mary into the car. The flashbulbs of local reporters sparked like firecrackers. Villagers craned their necks. A few tutted. Others whispered gleefully. Agatha's fists clenched helplessly. As the car pulled away, Mary looked out the window, directly at Agatha, with a silent plea that hit far deeper than Agatha expected. Charles placed a hand on her arm. "Aggie, you all right?" "No," Agatha whispered. "I'm furious, and I'm not letting this village hang Mary if she's innocent." The police cars turned the corner and disappeared. Carsley, satisfied with its spectacle, slowly dispersed. Agatha exhaled, shaking off the chill. Back in her cottage, Hodge greeted her with a flick of the tail and a pointed glance toward his food bowl. The kettle hissed softly on the hob. Agatha stroked Hodge's back. "We're going to clear Mary's name," she murmured, "even if she's been unbearable for years." Hodge stretched luxuriously across the counter, unconcerned. His nonchalance grounded her in a way no human ever could. Agatha squared her shoulders. The real killer was still out there, and now she had no choice but to hunt them. "You're going to help me," Agatha announced, marching into Charles's cottage without knocking. Charles looked up from a newspaper. "That's rarely good news." "I am going to clear Mary Fortune," Agatha declared, hands on hips. "Not because I like her, I don't, but because I cannot let the police swan about acting as if they're the only people with functioning brains." Charles sighed. "So this is pride, not compassion." "It's justice," Agatha snapped. "It's pride-flavoured justice." She dragged him outside before he could protest. Carselli's afternoon was blustery, with ruffled hedges and windows rattling in their frames, while sunbeams darted in and out from behind restless clouds. The weather suited her mood, unsettled, irritable, and determined. "We are going," Agatha said, "to reconstruct the entire Garden Day timetable." Charles blinked. "You've become Poirot." "Poirot wouldn't tolerate Doris Simpson," Agatha muttered. "I, sadly, must." They began at Mary Fortune's gate. Agatha held a notebook like a general with battle plans. Felix arrived late morning. He flirted with the camera. He criticised nearly everything. Then he headed to the refreshment table. "Where your hosepipes soak the WI, ladies," Charles reminded. Agatha scowled. "That is irrelevant. Moving on." They paced across Mary's immaculate lawn, now slightly scuffed by police visits, to the folding tables where cakes, tea, and cordial had been served. Tea was handled by Doris, Mrs. Pike, and Amelia Briggs, Agatha recited. Cordial by Mary's friend Belinda Marsh. And the sugar bowls, ah yes, changed hands constantly. "And that is your clue?" Charles asked. "It's the only thing that touches everyone," Agatha said. "Cake slices vary. Teacups are random. But sugar bowls, those pass through every female hand in the WI like currency." Charles watched her survey the table layout like a hawk stalking prey. "This is when I remind you that you are not a police officer." "And yet," Agatha said smugly, "I am about to prove I'm better than one." She strode toward a cluster of WI ladies chatting outside the church hall. Doris Simpson, spotting Agatha, bristled like a cat seeing a rival. "What now?" she demanded. "I require detailed recollections," Agatha said. "Every small thing. Who poured what? Who passed what? Who sneezed? Who coughed? Who licked a spoon?" Doris interrupted. "Dare I ask why?" "Because Felix Trent's cordial poisoning theory is shaky," Agatha said. "The timing's wrong." Doris sniffed. "I like the poisoning idea. Very dramatic." "It's incorrect," Agatha insisted. "Felix coughed and spluttered, but he didn't collapse until after tea, which means his tea killed him, or rather the sugar in it." A ripple ran through the WI women. Mrs. Pike covered her mouth. "Oh my goodness." Amelia Briggs looked guilty simply for existing. Doris frowned. "But sugar is sugar." "Sugar is sugar," Agatha replied, "unless someone tampered with the cubes, and only a few people handled that bowl." Doris narrowed her eyes. "What are you implying?" "That someone slipped a toxic powder or dried plant extract inside the sugar cubes," Agatha said, triumphant. "Felix had hay fever and sensitivities. A subtle plant-based poison would mimic an allergic reaction. Convenient misdirection." Charles murmured, "That's rather clever." "I know," Agatha said. She herded the WI women into the hall like a shepherd corralling particularly stubborn sheep. "Right. Who touched the sugar bowl, and when?" Doris crossed her arms. "I lifted it to refill it. It felt heavier than usual, actually." Agatha froze. "Heavier?" "Yes," Doris said. "I thought someone had overfilled it, nearly strained my wrist." Agatha's mind tingled. Packed inside. Something heavy, as if someone hid something in the bowl beneath the cubes. Her heartbeat quickened. A box of toxic powder hidden under sugar could be quickly accessed, then resealed. Anyone watching would see only cubes being picked up. Agatha flipped to a fresh notebook page. Who else handled the sugar bowl? Mrs. Pike shyly raised her hand. I moved it closer to Felix when he approached. Amelia added, and I tidied the table after Mrs. Fortune spilled a bit of tea. And Mary? Agatha asked, watching their expressions. Doris sniffed. Mary barely touched anything. She was too busy preening. Agatha frowned. That was inconvenient. Mary having little contact with the sugar bowl made her an even less likely poisoner. Charles whispered, This is pointing away from Mary. Agatha whispered back, Everything is pointing away from Mary. The thought irritated her. She wanted Mary either clearly innocent or clearly guilty, not this limbo that muddled everything. Now, Agatha said, tell me everyone's movements. Start at 11 o'clock. They spent the next hour piecing together a surprisingly tangled timetable. Livia Potts had slipped away to check a display near the kitchen door. Gavin Pike had vanished to make a phone call, though no one heard the phone ring. Mary had disappeared into her shed for several minutes, long enough for someone else to enter and plant evidence. Every suspect's timeline had a wobble. This is useless, Doris complained. Everyone's guilty of something. Exactly, Agatha said, which means the killer needed a very specific moment. Felix was alive at the cordial table, alive when he criticized Mrs. Pike's buns, alive after the hosepipe debacle. Charles interrupted, and dead minutes after he drank tea. Agatha nodded slowly. So the question isn't who hated him. That's everyone. The real question is... But the thought snagged in her mind like a burr, unfinished and irritating. She needed more data. She needed Bill. Hours later she cornered him behind the Red Lion, where he was quietly trying to eat a sandwich before his next shift. Bill, she said, I've reconstructed the entire afternoon. Bill closed his eyes. Of course you have. The cordial wasn't poisoned, Agatha said. It was the sugar. Bill sighed. Agatha, don't dismiss me, listen. She pushed her notebook into his hands. The timing fits, the symptoms fit, and the only way to poison someone so publicly is to slip something into a shared item. Bill scanned her notes. His brow tightened. This actually isn't terrible, Agatha. Agatha glowed. High praise. But, Bill continued, the police have already built a case around Mary's motive and the herbicide found in her shed. Agatha pointed sharply at him. Her shed was tampered with. I found evidence on my own. Which you were not supposed to investigate, Bill said. Agatha ignored him. Look at this instead. Who knew Felix had plant allergies? Who knew he always took 2 sugar cubes? Who handled the bowl? Who had a reason to make the death look like hay fever? Bill rubbed his forehead. Agatha, I don't have time. She stepped closer. Someone needed Felix silenced at exactly that moment. Not later, not earlier, exactly when he sipped that tea. Bill stared at her. She stared right back, and then slowly he exhaled. Write everything down, every timetable, every detail. I'll look at it. Agatha felt triumph surge through her chest. That evening Charles joined her in the cottage as she spread papers, maps, receipts and witness notes across the table like a general preparing for a siege. Hodge sniffed a sheet, decided it wasn't edible and sprawled disdainfully across the corner. We have to break this down, Agatha muttered, minute by minute. Charles leaned against the counter. Why do you care so much? You don't like Mary? I don't have to like her to want justice, Agatha retorted. Besides, if she didn't do it, someone else is laughing at us. Ah, Charles said. There we are. Pride again. Agatha ignored him. She built a timeline. 11:05, Felix arrives. 11:20, first wave of visitors. 11:40, cordial tasting. 11:55, hosepipe incident, irrelevant but humiliating. 12:10, tea poured for Felix. 12:12, Felix sweetens tea with 2 cubes. 12:14, Felix coughs, gasps. 12:16, Felix collapses near pond. 2 minutes, Agatha murmured. The poison worked within 2 minutes. That narrows the substance. Charles sat up. Meaning? Meaning something fast-acting, plant-based, something that mimics hay fever, something powdered, something that could be hidden in sugar. Her mind raced. Which suspect would know about plant poisons? Which suspect would know Felix's allergic tendencies? Which suspect handled sugar? Doris claiming the bowl felt heavy suddenly mattered more. Someone packed something into that bowl, Agatha murmured. Added weight. Hid the poison under the cubes. Charles nodded. And retrieved it when needed. Or left it there, Agatha said. Let Felix take a cube containing the poison. But how would they know he'd take that cube? Agatha grinned sharply. Felix had habits, predictable ones. He always took the top cubes, and always two. Charles shook his head in amazement. You frighten me sometimes. Good, Agatha said. Fear sharpens loyalty. She stared again at the timeline. Everyone had motives. Everyone had opportunities. But only a few had that precise window between cordial and collapse. 5 suspects hovered in her mind like midges around jam. Mary Fortune, blackmail and pride. But she barely handled the sugar bowl. And the footprints in Agatha's garden weren't hers. Livia Potts, professional ruin. But her herbicide purchase predated everything. A red herring wrapped around a clue. Gavin Pike, financial desperation. Gavin near Mary's gate. Gavin arguing with Felix. Gavin with contracts to lose. Belinda Marsh served cordial. But cordial wasn't the delivery method. Amelia Briggs tidied the table. Too gentle or too overlooked? Agatha rubbed her temples. Someone needed Felix silence that day, not later. That tells us everything. Why that day? Charles asked. Agatha stood abruptly. Because Felix discovered something on Garden Day itself. Charles blinked. What? Look at it, Agatha said, tapping the timeline. He asked Mary who planted her roses. He asked Belinda where the cordial came from. He asked Gavin about council contracts. He confronted 3 people in one afternoon. Meaning he'd uncovered something big. Exactly, Agatha said. Something connecting council landscaping, organic fraud, and a perfectly manicured garden. Something he intended to publish. Charles frowned. But who knew he'd publish it immediately? Everyone, Agatha said. He told half the village he'd be making an example. He bragged about a career-defining expose. Charles gave a low whistle. So someone panicked. They more than panicked, Agatha said. They acted. A knock on the door startled Hodge, who leapt from the table with a disdainful chirp. Bill Wong stepped in, looking weary. I've considered your sugar theory, he said, and the doctor confirms the poison acted within minutes. Your timing checks out. Agatha felt smugness bloom. I told you. Bill held up a hand. But we don't have a suspect yet. Then watch carefully, Agatha said, sweeping her papers into a neat pile. Because the murderer isn't the one who hated Felix. Everyone hated Felix. The murderer is the one who needed him silenced at exactly 12:14. Bill squinted. 12:14? The moment he drank the tea, Agatha said. The moment the sugar dissolved. Charles added, and we know who handled that sugar bowl. Bill looked between them. Are you saying? Not yet, Agatha said. But we will know soon, piece by piece, and when we do, she straightened triumphantly, the entire pattern will reveal itself. Bill sighed. Just promise me you won't confront anyone alone. Agatha nodded. She lied. Hours later, with Charles gone and Bill patrolling elsewhere, Agatha sat alone at her kitchen table, surrounded by notes and lists. Hodge curled nearby, one paw twitching lazily. Agatha stared at the final line of her notes. Who needed him silenced at that precise moment? Not earlier, not later. Her mind clicked, not loudly, not dramatically, simply and decisively. She leaned back, eyes widening. Oh, she whispered, it's not about gardening at all. The truth, or at least the shape of it, settled over her like a blanket. She smiled grimly, stroking Hodge's back. We have them, she murmured. Hodge purred, unimpressed but warm. The kettle sighed softly in the background, a familiar domestic anchor grounding the rising storm of revelation. And Agatha Raisin, senses sharpened, pride awakened, and mystery nearly solved, prepared herself for the confrontation to come. Agatha began the morning by informing Charles with the regal air of a woman summoning a footman. We're paying Gavin Pike a little visit. Wear something that doesn't make you look like an idle aristocrat." Charles looked up from buttering his toast. "My dear girl, that's my natural state. Dressing down would be dishonest." "Dishonest suits you," Agatha snapped, already fastening her necklace. Hodge sat on a chair behind her, tail flicking with the faint disapproval of a creature who disliked commotion before breakfast. Charles's convertible wheezed into life with its usual aristocratic reluctance, and Agatha folded herself in with the annoyance of someone who believed she deserved a chauffeur-driven Jaguar. As they turned out of Carsley, she said, "Gavin Pike's hiding something. Anyone who builds a business that slick is compensating." "For what?" Charles drawled. "I'll let you know once I've seen the size of his office," Agatha muttered. Gavin's garden centre headquarters did not disappoint. The place gleamed with the self-satisfaction of an enterprise that sold lifestyle rather than plants. A row of spotless trolleys lined the entrance like foot soldiers. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of expensive fertilizer, which Charles claimed smelled like the faint regret of someone who overpaid for orchids. Agatha marched to the office block at the back. The receptionist, shiny-haired and serene, said Gavin would see them shortly, which was receptionist speak for after he finishes admiring himself in the mirror. When Gavin finally appeared, he filled the doorway with a salesman's confidence. His shirt was beautifully tailored, his smile even more so. "Mrs. Raisin, and Lord Fraith, what an unexpected honour. How may I assist Carsley's favourite detective double act?" "We're not a double act," Agatha said sharply. "I lead. He drives." "I do much more than that," Charles objected, though not very strongly. Agatha settled into the visitor's chair, which was designed to make guests feel slightly inferior. "We're following up on Felix Trent's murder. I understand he asked you for documentation on your council contracts." Something flickered in Gavin's eyes. "Routine fact-checking." "Routine?" Agatha said. "Felix requesting proof of ethical sourcing doesn't sound routine, especially when you didn't have it." Charles's eyebrows rose. "Agatha, where on earth—" "Please," she cut in. "Let the man answer." Gavin's jaw tightened. Felix enjoyed stirring trouble. He threatened a negative piece unless I provided paperwork. It was extortion. "Many would call it journalism," Agatha replied, enjoying the faint flush on Gavin's cheeks. He leaned forward, voice lowering. "I had nothing to gain from harming him. A scandal would destroy my contracts. I would never risk that." "Interesting," Agatha murmured, rising. "Thank you. You've been illuminating." Outside, Charles said, "You practically accused him of murder." "I need to see how rattled these people can get," Agatha said. "Rattled people spill things." Charles sighed. "So what's next?" "We rattle him again, but discreetly." Charles stared at her. "Please don't say breaking in." "Of course not," Agatha said primly. "We're merely entering a locked greenhouse for investigative purposes." He groaned. "You're impossible." "That's why you adore me," she said, already marching back to the car. The garden centre grounds emptied after closing time. Warmth from the day lingered under the glass panes, giving the air inside the greenhouse block a heavy, almost tropical stillness. A perfect place for secrets, Agatha thought. Slipping through a side door Charles had accidentally discovered unlatched. Inside, rows of flawless plants stretched into the dimness. Agatha whispered, "This place is too perfect. It's unnatural. No slug would dare live here." Charles fanned himself. "And it's like a botanical sauna." "Stop whinging and look for something out of place." They separated, the floor creaking faintly under their feet. Agatha approached a bench stacked with gardening gloves. She picked up a pair marked with pale, powdery stains. Not soil, something finer. She held them to the light. "These weren't used for pruning, they were used for something chemical." Charles appeared at her elbow. "Look what I found." He held up a plastic bag. Inside lay a notebook. Felix Trent's missing notebook. Agatha's pulse jumped. It was hidden. Deliberately. Charles scanned the shadows uneasily. "We should leave." They didn't get the chance. A loud click sounded behind them. Gavin Pike stood in the doorway, face stony, hands tight at his sides. "Breaking and entering," he said softly. "That's a new low for you, Agatha." Agatha stepped forward, chin high. Why hide Felix's notebook? Guilty conscience? "It implicates my finances," Gavin snapped. I panicked when I heard he was dead and didn't want the police misinterpreting it." "That's convenient," Agatha said. Charles murmured, "Perhaps we should let him explain." Gavin's shoulders slumped. "I didn't kill Felix. I found that notebook in my car boot the morning after the murder. Someone planted it. I hid it here until I figured out what to do." "And the gloves?" Agatha asked coolly. "I have dozens," Gavin said. "Any staff could have used them." Agatha didn't entirely believe him, but the raw fear in his eyes didn't look like a killer's. It looked like a man terrified of losing everything to scandal. Charles intervened gently. "Let's not escalate. Allow us to leave and we'll hand the notebook to Bill." Gavin hesitated but stepped back. "Take it. And please, find the real killer before this destroys my business." Outside, Agatha inhaled fresh air with relief. "He's lying about something." "They're all lying about something," Charles said. "That's the trouble with village murder." "Felix's notebook answers part of it," Agatha said. "Let's get home." Bill arrived at Agatha's cottage an hour later, the notebook sealed inside an evidence bag. Hodge eyed the officer from atop the armchair, tail flicking in that judgy way only cats and vicars truly mastered. Bill examined the gardening gloves. These stains matched the herbicide used on Felix, but Gavin could be telling the truth. Someone might have worn them to frame him. Agatha folded her arms. "That's too tidy. A neat little parcel pointing directly at him. Convenient suspects irritate me." Bill sighed. "Agatha, please don't interfere." "I'm not interfering," she said. "I'm contributing." "That's what worries me," Bill muttered, heading out. When the door shut, Agatha locked it, shooed Hodge off her chair, and opened the notebook. Rain tapped lightly at the window, thin, needling drizzle that felt like London following her home. She skimmed page after page. It was not the expected catalogue of villainy. Felix's harshness had softened in recent weeks. His notes showed guilt for careers he'd ruined. He'd decided to repair some of the damage, starting with Livia Potts. "Remarkable," Agatha whispered. "The man had a conscience after all." Hodge hopped into her lap, settling with the solemnity of a judge overseeing proceedings. Agatha read on. Felix had also uncovered irregularities in the district council's landscaping contracts, payments routed through shell suppliers, inflated invoices. Gavin Pike's name appeared repeatedly, not as the mastermind, Felix didn't think him clever enough, but as the beneficiary. Felix planned a column titled "The Green Garden Myth," promising to reveal everything. Agatha tapped the notebook. If this had gone public, someone would have gone down with him. Someone who knew chemistry well enough to deliver poison subtly, using a plant-based toxin that mimicked hay fever. She glanced at the rain-slick window. Someone like an organic grower. Hodge meowed in agreement, or hunger. The next morning, Agatha met Charles outside her cottage. He had the look of a man hoping to be told they were going for a gentle country drive. "We're going to Livia Potts," Agatha declared. He closed his eyes. "Why can't we ever visit someone pleasant?" "Because pleasant people don't murder TV gardeners," she said briskly. But she didn't knock on Livia's door yet. She paced her own garden instead, eyes narrowed. "The killer planted evidence in Gavin's greenhouse, and they trampled my borders the other night. That suggests someone strong, determined, and familiar with chemicals." "Livia fits strength?" Charles asked. "Not physical strength," Agatha said. "Emotional heft. Bitterness builds muscles of its own." Charles nodded. "Fair." "But more importantly," Agatha continued, "Felix intended to restore her reputation. Killing him ends that hope. It's illogical." "So you think she didn't do it?" Agatha hesitated. Logic didn't always rule murder. Before she could reply, Mrs. Bloxby appeared at the gate, warm smile softening the morning. "Agatha, dear, I had a thought about Livia." "Is it helpful?" Agatha asked, too sharply. Mrs. Bloxby's gaze twinkled. "Most of my thoughts are." They invited her inside. Hodge wound between their ankles, purring with territorial interest. Mrs. Bloxby folded her hands. "Livia has a temper, yes, but she also has pride. If Felix truly intended to rehabilitate her business, she might have seen that as a final chance. Murder would destroy it forever." Agatha tapped her chin. "So she gains nothing." "Unless," Mrs. Bloxby said softly, she feared Felix had changed his mind again. That struck Agatha with the accuracy of a thrown pebble. Felix had changed his opinions frequently. Perhaps Livia didn't trust him. Mrs. Bloxby rose to leave. "Be careful, Agatha. Not every gardener prunes gently." Hodge followed her to the door with reverence. Agatha turned to Charles. "We still need to confront Livia, but I want to do it with strategy, not bluster." "You?" Charles said. "Strategic. Don't push your luck." They drove to the nursery that afternoon. The breeze was cool but bright, lifting faded signs against the sheds. The place still looked exhausted, plants leaning as if bored with life. Livia Potts emerged, wiping soil from her hands. "What now?" Agatha stepped forward. "Felix planned to restore your reputation." Livia froze. "What?" "His notebook," Agatha said. "He meant to praise your work again." Livia's breath caught. For a moment she looked almost young, hopeful. Then her face hardened. "He changed his mind too often. I couldn't risk another humiliation." Charles studied her. "Couldn't risk, or didn't trust?" Livia shook her head. "I didn't kill him. If I wanted revenge, I'd have given him food poisoning on television." Agatha believed her. A petty act of sabotage fit Livia far more closely than a calculated poisoning. "So, who used herbicide in the sugar?" Agatha pressed. Livia blinked. "Herbicide? What herbicide?" She looked genuinely shocked. Agatha exchanged a glance with Charles. "We've been assuming the poison came from gardening chemicals because of the gloves in Mary's shed. But what if that too was staged?" Charles nodded slowly. "Someone with knowledge of plants, but also of people." Agatha felt the idea form like a bud forcing through soil. She whispered, "Someone who knew Felix's allergies. Someone who handled tea trays. Someone unobtrusive but everywhere." Charles stared. "You don't mean—" "Not yet," Agatha cut in, "but I think the timetable will tell us." That night, Agatha returned home, head buzzing. She placed the notebook on her table and lit a lamp. Outside, drizzle whispered against the glass. Hodge climbed into her lap, warm and comforting. Agatha stroked his head. "Almost there, darling. The truth's hiding in plain sight, just like a weed among roses." Hodge purred in agreement. A kettle clicked softly off in the kitchen, and the cottage settled into the kind of hush Agatha found bracing rather than lonely. She whispered, "Tomorrow, I pull out the last weed." Hodge stretched, claiming her lap entirely, and Agatha allowed herself a small, wry smile. The trap was set. Now she only had to watch who walked into it. Agatha opened the W.I. hall door with the crisp authority of a woman prepared to trap a murderer between a plate of custard creams and a flip chart. "Keep your wits sharp, ladies," she announced. "Today's talk may prove unexpectedly educational." Doris Simpson, carrying a stack of mismatched mugs, eyed her suspiciously. "You're not going to start one of your sessions, are you, Agatha?" "I start only masterpieces," Agatha said, sweeping past her. Bill Wong, stationed discreetly at the back, raised a polite hand. "I'm simply observing," he said, though the atmosphere suggested the entire hall was observing him instead. The morning shone brightly through the mullioned windows, making the polished tables gleam with a smug sort of cheer. Villagers trickled in, chatting about compost and wormeries, blissfully unaware that Agatha planned to turn the afternoon into a theatrical finale. Livia Potts stood at the front, clutching her notes. Her hair had been brushed into obedience, but nothing could disguise the jittery tension in her posture. "Good morning," she began, voice wobbling. "Today I'll speak on organic pest control." Agatha folded her arms. "How fitting," she murmured. Charles, lounging near the biscuit table, shot her a look. "Do try not to pounce too early." Livia launched into her talk with surprising competence. She spoke of companion planting and neem oil, of soil health and kindness to cabbage whites. But Agatha noticed the glossiness of her eyes whenever Felix Trent's name hovered near the edges of conversation. Guilt perched on her shoulder like a badly balanced hat. When polite applause faded, Agatha stepped forward with a bright, false smile. "Thank you, Livia. Now, I thought we might continue with a practical demonstration at my cottage." A ripple of curiosity spread. Villagers loved nothing more than seeing Agatha's garden, which was always hovering somewhere between creative chaos and horticultural crime scene. Bill straightened. "Agatha." "Educational, Bill," she said sweetly. "Quite safe." Within 20 minutes, the W.I. had transplanted itself onto Agatha's lawn. The place looked almost respectable in the fresh midday sunlight. Charles carried out a tray of cups, Hodge weaving between his ankles with polite disdain for guests invading his territory. Agatha stood behind a small table, set with teapots, herbs, and a bottle identical to the herbicide found in Mary's shed. She held it up. "Now, ladies, this is a product we all recognize. Perfectly legal, perfectly dangerous." A collective murmur rose. Agatha uncorked the bottle just enough to sniff. "In high doses, deadly, but in very low dilution, it can look like hay fever or a minor allergy." Her voice dropped into a purr. Precisely how Felix Trent appeared moments before collapsing. Livia's face drained almost instantly. "That's not the brand Mary uses," she blurted. "The concentration is too high, unless you dilute it at least." Silence crashed over the garden. Livia blinked, realizing she had spoken too much, too fast. Agatha's eyes glittered. "Nobody mentioned concentration, Livia." Livia backed up a step. I meant in general. Anyone who gardens would know." "Oh, but that's the point," Agatha said softly. "Only a few people knew both Felix's allergies and plant toxins well enough to combine them." Bill stepped closer. "Livia, we need clarity." Livia's mouth trembled. Agatha rested the herbicide bottle on the table and lifted Felix's notebook. "He was going to restore your reputation, clear your name, promote your nursery, and yes, expose the crooked council contracts that kept you afloat." A gasp swept through the onlookers. Livia stared at the ground. "He promised so many things," she whispered, "but he ruined me. Do you know what it's like to lose everything because of a smirk on television?" Agatha did know, in her own way. Shame was a cruel spotlight. Livia choked on a sob. "I only meant to scare him. I tampered with the sugar for his tea. He always took 2 cubes. I thought he'd fall ill, Mary would take the blame, and maybe I could rebuild my business." Bill's expression hardened. "But he died." "I didn't mean—" Livia pressed trembling hands to her face. "I panicked. I hid the herbicide in Mary's shed. It was perfect. Everyone already thought she cheated." Doris gave a triumphant sniff. "I said she was drastic." Agatha shot her a glare. "Not helpful, Doris." Mary Fortune, released on bail and bristling with injured pride, stepped forward. "You spiteful little—" Bill raised a calming hand. "Let's keep this civil. Livia Potts, I'm arresting you on suspicion of—" Livia sagged. I know. As Bill led her away, the villagers dispersed, muttering with the solemn excitement of people who would recount these events for years. Mary paused before Agatha, expression tight. "I suppose," she said grudgingly, "I should thank you." Agatha lifted her chin. "You're welcome. It doesn't make us friends." "I wouldn't dream of it," Agatha replied, though a flicker of sympathy warmed her chest. Mary walked off. Charles wandered over, hands in pockets. "Well done, old girl." "Don't call me that," Agatha said, though her voice held only half the usual bite. He smiled and drifted away, leaving Agatha alone with her muddled borders. The sunlight softened, wrapping her tired garden in a forgiving glow. She stepped toward the herb beds, lighting a cigarette despite her own rule about not chain-smoking during moments of reflection. The smoke curled upward lazily. Hodge padded out, brushing against her leg before climbing onto a warm patch of earth. His tail flicked as though approving her triumph. Agatha exhaled slowly. "Maybe I should have been a detective all along, Hodge," he answered with a soft purr that could have meant anything from agreement to a polite request for dinner. The telephone rang faintly inside. Agatha stubbed out the cigarette and hurried in, Hodge following with regal dignity. Mrs. Bloxby's gentle voice filled the receiver. "Agatha, dear, I wondered if you'd like a quiet cup of tea. You've had a trying week." Agatha's chest tightened with a warmth she rarely admitted. "Yes," she said. "Actually, yes, I would." She hung up, looking down at Hodge. "Come on, then. Let's pretend I'm capable of contentment for half an hour." Hodge stretched, tail high, and trotted ahead as though leading her toward peace. Agatha followed, smiling faintly, wondering whether happiness lay in gardens, mysteries, or simply having someone kind waiting with tea before the next scandal began.